would now like to introduce today's presenters. Vishal Gupta is a Vice President on the Information and Technology Services team at Everest Group. In his role, he focuses on data analytics, recruitment process outsourcing, and managed service provider research offerings. Priya Bala is a Practice Director on the Information and Technology Services team at Everest Group, focusing on data, analytics, and artificial intelligence practice. Priya is passionate about creating value for clients with her deep proficiency in the high-tech space and driving research on emerging trends for buyers and providers. And with that, I'd like to turn things over to Vishal.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, and welcome everyone. I'm sure, unless you are living under a rock, generative AI is something that all of you had encountered, in the last 1 year, almost in every conversation, right? So our intent today, in this webinar is to not only talk about what happened in 2023, but more importantly, how do we see this space evolving and what are some of the things we can expect to happen in 2024. In a lot of ways, the Gen AI is this one in a generation movement for all of us. I feel lucky I'm living in this time and see what is unfolding before my eyes. But I think, with any transformational tech, some sanity has to be brought in to see, how things will unfold. So as I said, our intention and objective would be to, remove the froth and talk about what is really happening on the ground, what is not happening, and how do we see this evolving. Moving, I'm not going to spend too much time on talking about what Gen AI is. I think most of you who are here, you already know what it is. So I'm going to take 2 or 3 minutes to quickly recap what we saw in 2023. And this is again, just we cherry picked some of the developments that happened in the Gen AI world in 2023. This is by no means an exhaustive list of all that happened and all that was important that happened. If we were to do that, we probably take 100 pages to kind of highlight all of that. But to quickly highlight, see, one, huge investments in this space, from big techs like Microsoft, like Amazon, even other players in the data and AI world like Databricks. Huge investments from the investor community in new age startups that are focusing on Gen AI. To the rise of the hardware players, someone like Nvidia, who skyrocketed, whose stocks skyrocketed, with the launch of ChatGPT, but even others like AMD, Intel, running into the fray. Third, as the technology started getting into people's hand, there were obvious risks that were highlighted. So the first incident was Samsung, employees, they leaked, one of the employees leaked an internal confidential data, probably a code, while using ChatGPT. And they've started the whole conversation around, how to use AI or Gen AI responsibly. What are the risks associated with it? More recently, in the last quarter of 2023, we also saw New York Times suing Microsoft and OpenAI for copyright infringement. So multiple such copyright infringement developments happened. At the same time, we also saw many countries, governments across the world started to talk about regulations, to make AI more safer for everyone, right? So a lot of these developments happened, but what I would really want to say is, look, 2023 was momentous for generative AI. It was probably the most talked thing everywhere. In my conversations, yes, I'm a practitioner of broader IT, tech, digital area. There was not a single conversation where generative AI didn't come up. So naturally, entering into 2024, there is a huge interest. There is a huge kind of set of conversations that are happening on Gen AI. And the way we are going to run this webinar is we have identified 5 key themes. They are in no way exhaustive. If we have to talk about Gen AI and everything related to Gen AI, probably it will take days. But we have identified 5 key themes, which we think are important at a broader level, cut across, a cross section of stakeholders, enterprises, and industries, might be relevant for a broader set, right? And before we get into those 5 themes, the only thing I would want to say is, and the reason I want to talk about it is because this particular question featured in a lot of my conversations in 2023. And the exact question that was posed to me was, look, Gen AI holds a lot of promise. It seems to be a transformational tech, one in a generation kind of a thing. But similar things, similar promise was made, when metaverse was launched, or when crypto was launched, when blockchain was launched. And clearly, I think all of us would agree, those technologies, while yes, they might have use cases in specific industries and areas, and they might still be applied, but they didn't make the mark that was anticipated. So is it that with Gen AI, are we going to see the same? And this is where, we, at least I have a very strong conviction, it's not going to be the same. Gen AI is fundamentally very different from some of the previous technological disruptions that we saw. Just to, compare with Gen AI, with metaverse, see, some of the previous technologies, they were more tech related disruption, which means the technological advancement was great, but the real life applications, practical use cases were unclear. But with generative AI, the start happened with ChatGPT in later part of December or November 2022. And what that did was it provided that real application in the hands of everyday people to realize what the technology could do. It had a real business application. It had a real application in the real world. That gives a lot of conviction to a lot of people that look, this technology can be applied in a practical real world and can have real outcomes rather than something which is just transformational tech and does not mean, and it's unclear where to apply it, right? So metaverse suffered that fate. The second part was, the second part which gives me conviction is, see, a lot of players, entities in the entire ecosystem has come together to invest in Gen AI. You talk about the big tech companies, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon. You talk about the investor PE community, billions of dollars being poured into AI. You talk about the broader organization enterprises, lot of investments. You even talk about the public sector and the governments, lot of investments, conversations, regulations being deployed to control AI and how we responsibly deploy it. Net of it, what I'm trying to say is, if so many entities and people have come together and poured their time, energy, and not to say billions of dollars of investment, I'm sure they're going to make something out of it. So to leave you with the message in the beginning, we do see Gen AI to be transformational. We do see Gen AI to stay. The question is, 2023 was momentous, but 2024 will be a reality check. It is now that we'll see how it will unfold, which are the areas where we'll see investment, which are the areas where we will not see investments. And that is where we'll need a more nuanced conversation. So keeping that in mind, let us move. Let's go to the 5 key themes we want to talk about, and we'll draw parallels with what happened in 2023 and how what to expect going forward in 2024. The first theme is, I'm sure a lot of you would agree. See, in 2023, a lot of the action with Gen AI was concentrated around pilots, POCs, proof of concepts, or experimentation. Because the tech is so new, no major enterprise wanted to get their hand too dirty and kind of deploy it at scale. So a lot of the action that happened in walled green environments, in experimentations, in POCs. What happened was, even during the entire year, a lot of those POCs still remained in the pilot or the POC stage. They didn't move to production. So there is a natural pilot fatigue setting in. Enterprises are becoming wary of, look, whether I can even scale this technology or not. And if I can scale, where can I scale it? So just to put things in perspective, this is kind of a quick glimpse of what happened in 2023. The chart represents, and we looked at a sample set of good number of AI, Gen AI pilots, deals that happened in the market. And we even kind of distilled it by, the first half, which is Q1, Q2 of 2023 and Q3, Q4 of 2023, and looked at how many of these deals were more into exploration, experimentation, production, or were not even kind of, started, right? What you will see is, even till the end of 2023, a large majority of Gen AI kind of related implementations were still in the pilot experimentation stage. Very few moved to production. The number that we have says 22%, but one can argue it can even be as low as 10%, 15%. We looked at the sample data, right? So a lot of the deals didn't move into production. And our conviction is that even look in 2024, we do not expect a large number of these Gen AI implementations to production. Even I would go to the extent to say some of them may never go into production. And there are 2 key big reasons why we are not seeing Gen AI implementations or POCs not moving into production. Number 1, unclear ROI. See, this is again, the promise of tech is huge, We have seen early glimpses of what the tech can do. But when enterprises started deploying it in their specific business areas, functional areas, that's where they started to kind of, think through how much to invest, because till the time it is in experimentation and POC, it's kind of, they're not spending much. But if they have to scale it, that's where the ROI conversations become very, very important and prominent. And the thing is, this is with Gen AI, but broader AI, I can say the ROI is hard to create, right? Because there is a lot of intangible benefits related to what Gen AI can do. It's not easy to quantify the benefit of the hard dollar value of what one can get out of it as related to some of the other technologies. That makes it extremely difficult to build the business case for Gen AI. So the ROI conversation is becoming very, very difficult. That is kind of hampering some of these, pilots moving to production. The second part that is kind of playing a spoil sport is the entire risk conversation. And as I said, Samsung, we saw what could happen even if not deployed in the right fashion. Gen AI can even have existential threat on your business, right? We even did a webinar last year. We kind of launched our framework of responsible AI. So when I say risks, there are multiple risks. One, can Gen AI produce the right outputs? There has been situations, conversations where I was personally part of. Stakeholders are saying, look, what the technology can do is great, but we need deterministic outputs. But the very nature of the technology, it's probabilistic in nature. You cannot determine what the solution will, what the output from the solution will be. Second, the data privacy security, you need to tightly control what data goes in, what data goes out, and what kind of, access controls, model controls you have deployed, because sensitive confidential data from your organization can go out in the public domain, which can have repercussions in terms of monetary losses, lawsuits, reputational damage, a lot of things, right? And then there is a whole conversation of ethicality, bias, stuff like that. So there are still a lot of risks associated with Gen AI. A lot of enterprises have started to understand what those risks are, but to solve for those risks, that's going to be a journey. We're still kind of uncovering what an enterprise can do for those risks, but that's going to be a journey, a gradual development. But at the moment, the unclear ROI and risks are playing spoil sport, which is hampering a lot of these pilots to move into production. So then what is happening, at least in my conversation, and we did kind of a roundtable, a focused group discussion last year. In the later part of last year, we brought together some 100 plus CXOs, we partnered with our partners and we did a joint brainstorming. And the key question that emerged during that conversation was that, look, the CIO, CTO, CXOs are saying, look, we spent a lot of money in 2023 in experimentation. We poured a lot of money in understanding what the art of the possible can be. We don't want to do that in 2024, especially, it's a constrained macro environment right now. I think everyone would agree. 2021 and 2022 saw huge tech spending, huge spending in large digital transformational deals. But the enterprise stakeholders have become more prudent now with the tightening, monetary policy, macroeconomic headwinds, and other things. So there is greater caution as to where the money is being spent. Gen AI is, however, still a silver lining, but there are questions being raised on Gen AI as well, right? We do not have endless pool of money to experiment with. So what that is leading to is enterprise stakeholders are saying, look, don't tell us where Gen AI can work. Don't tell us what is the art of the possible. Tell us where Gen AI is working, because we want to prioritize where we spend our money. We want to prioritize our investments. And that is where, it's going to be important to look at a sub-segment, sub-business, segment level to look at which use cases are working and which are not working. On this slide, we are taking an example of the banking industry. We looked at what are the top use cases where we believe Gen AI is being deployed. This is based on our conversation in the marketplace, some of the deals that we saw that happened. And we have created similar views for other areas, but of course, due to the paucity of time, we cannot discuss all areas, but we are giving banking as an example. And you can clearly see, the scale is showing, the blue dots are showing which areas we are seeing still are reeling in the pilot stage, which areas we see greater production level deals happening, right? Moving into production. And you will see that you can now clearly draw differentiation. For example, in the banking case, the bottom two areas, Gen AI assistants for clients where or RMs, where they are using Gen AI solutions, tools to better resolve clients' query or provide recommendations or leverage their history to provide more targeted offerings, or even for customer transaction classification. Temenos is have launched a solution that can be deployed by banks internally to analyze the large scale of transactions that happen globally in different languages, in whatever shape and form, right? So these two areas we are seeing, greater movement from pilot to production. On the right hand side, we're also showing some key technology platforms being used from, known vendors. In no way this is an exhaustive list. This is a preliminary view. This is also a representative list of vendors. But the broader point, the message I'm trying to make is one needs to go deeper into each industry vertical or a business function, look at it at a sub-segment level, see which areas where the Gen AI use cases are working, moving into production. Because at least from our conversations, we will see greater action in those areas where there is now a proven ROI, where greater deals are moving into production. That's the broader message we want to share here.
Thanks, Vishal. I think, and before you move ahead, we have a question here, and the question states: what are the practical applications of generative AI that which are seeing some enterprise adoption? So maybe let me take a stab at it, and please feel free to add. So based on our analysis as of now, and based on our conversations with the enterprise CXOs, I recently concluded 100 interviews with 100 plus CXOs. So what we've found is that there are three prominent areas which are clearly standing out in terms of enterprise adoption of generative AI. One is the content generation. So using large language models to create text, images, and other forms of content, which is the primary basic use case of Gen AI. So use cases like creative writing, email generation, image generation, auto completions, all of these kind of use cases. A good example here would be Yahoo Mail, which integrated generative AI features such as auto completion, email summarization, and personalized search. So that's one clear area that is standing out. Second area where we are seeing a lot of initiatives being taken is the enterprise knowledge management area, which involves usage of these large language models to understand and query the existing data within the enterprise in a natural language to generate relevant responses. So context-aware search, summarization, conversational AI for employee assistance. These are certain use cases that we are seeing. And what we saw is that Morgan Stanley is testing a generative AI tool, which is helping its advisors to get insights from more than 1 lakh plus research reports. So we are seeing many, many more such examples wherein the large pool of enterprise knowledge, which is already existing, is being built. Gen AI models being built to mine the large pool of knowledge which is there in the enterprise. And the last area that we see that which is getting more traction is, of course, the software development life cycle. So how do you automate certain parts of SDLC life cycle? And so definitely we are seeing testing is one area which is getting a lot of traction from enterprise, and another is code generation. So not the entire code generation, but at least generating some snippets. So we all saw the kind of traction that GitHub Copilot has received, including some big names like Coca-Cola, General Motors. All of these companies are experimenting, and they are actually using these tools internally. So these three areas clearly, in our opinion, are getting practical implementations of generative AI. Now, we are not sure of the scale, of course, but we've started seeing some production level use cases in these areas. I hope that answers.
Yeah, thanks, Priya. And in the interest of time, I'll keep on moving. And just to round up the conversation on this first theme, see, look, a lot of pilots happened in 2023. We're going to expect greater movement to production and greater focus from enterprise side to invest in use cases that can move to production. We saw action in 2023 in embedded applications, which means Gen AI embedded in existing tech stack, or Gen AI embedded as a one-off off-the-shelf solution. We're gonna see more customized solutions in 2024. What that means is, see, the true potential of the Gen AI technology lies when the solution can be contextualized to your specific business needs, right? And that is where we are hearing a lot of chatter around specific solutions models being trained on proprietary enterprise data to create a very contextualized set of solutions and tools. So we're gonna see greater customization given there will be investment in specific areas, and enterprises would want to have more contextualized solution for themselves rather than something which is being used from off the shelf. Standalone deployments to platformization, this takes this story hypothesis one step further. See, at the end of the day, what we are saying is, Gen AI is a business is solving for a business problem. Now, what that means is eventually, if you're going to look at customized solutions, there will be pockets within an organization where different solutions will be deployed. Something, let's say, for the finance function, something for procurement function, something for marketing. And if you take it to one step further, if you look at the Fortune 100 organizations and the scale at which they operate, imagine the number of such Gen AI solutions that will be deployed across horizontal functions or business units that can range in hundreds or even thousands of such Gen AI solutions, which means then there is going to be a need for a platform layer. Think of it as an enterprise-wide fabric that will eventually orchestrate the development, deployment, and more importantly, governance of these Gen AI solutions, because governance is going to be extremely important when enterprises take Gen AI to scale. And lastly, if 2023 was all about focusing on AI tech, which models, which solutions, which platforms, we believe the conversation has become more nuanced because enterprise stakeholders have understood that, look, enabling Gen AI doesn't mean we use fancy models or fancy tools. We need to have the right ecosystem in place, the right digital foundation in place, and most importantly, we need to have the right data in place. So we are seeing greater investments, not just on AI tech, but on the fundamental digital foundation, which includes your data layer, your technical infrastructure, and other things. So expect greater demand, greater action, for the enabling areas, which will ultimately enable the success of AI. So let's quickly do a poll, and I think Priya touched upon it, but we also wanted to, get your opinion. So which are the three functional areas in your organization where you have witnessed, the highest adoption of Gen AI? And see the initial view from a lot of, conversation, and you would have read a lot of reports, customer service, definitely number one, sales and marketing, again, because there is already a knowledge base there, and software development and IT. These were the three areas that at least we saw where a lot of conversations happened, a lot of action happening. Even we saw certain use cases, case studies where production level, action or deals were happening. Not to say other areas are not witnessing action. There are use cases, and there are kind of solutions being implemented in other horizontal business functions and industry verticals as well. But these three seem to be the top one. And if I look at the results, we have almost 180 185 responses, and clearly software development and IT and customer service, these two emerge as the biggest areas, and naturally so. Sales and marketing is third. So this is in alignment with what we are seeing as well. Customer services, software development and IT, and sales and marketing. These are the three areas where most action is happening on Gen AI. And I think it might be prudent for a lot of our listeners in the audience to start looking at which sub-segments within these broader areas, which sub-areas where you can start kind of getting your feet wet. With that, let's move on to our next theme, and let me invite Priya to take us through that.
Yeah. Thanks, Vishal. I hope the slides are moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will now be talking about the next theme in generative AI, Gen AI hardware. So if you look at this category, until last year, this has been a silent contributor to the AI world. There wasn't much noise about AI hardware beyond a closed group of companies, right, that played in this space. But 2023 was unique as it can be for the entire AI ecosystem, and hardware was no different. We all saw, and Vishal also touched upon it, how NVIDIA stock price shoot up as much as 200% in 2023, with generative AI driving the most of this upsurge. So that was a testament to the growing interest in this space. And Gen AI, as we all know, requires a lot of computing power, and it naturally pumped up the demand for AI hardware in 2023. And it's probably no news, right? I mean, we all heard OpenAI CEO quoting openly about AI chips being in so much shortage that he literally said that he doesn't want people to use ChatGPT as much. While there was a shortage, what we saw in 2023 was that a host of providers entered the AI hardware space, which is still date dominated by just a handful of large players, including the likes of NVIDIA, Intel, and so on and so forth. What we saw was that although they had some offerings previously as well, but they tried to newer players tried to come up with customized offering in this space. So Microsoft launched 2 new custom design chips and systems during their Ignite event last year. Then we also saw AMD, which launched MI300 series, which is a direct competition to NVIDIA's A100, which is powering a lot of these OpenAI's ChatGPT sort of solutions. So we saw that we also saw some new companies come up. So AI startups like Sambinova Systems, they are also ramping up their efforts in this space. So in a nutshell, the supply ecosystem for AI hardware grew significantly. However, despite of these efforts, what we anticipate is that the demand supply gap for AI hardware is still going to remain high even in 2024. Now, I have 2 strong reasons to believe this. One is that if you look at the efforts by these new entrants, or even by some of these former AI hardware players, or maybe say hyperscalers and other mature players, they launched these initiatives only late last year, and beyond a handful of players, the market is still not, some of these initiatives are not as mature as, say someone like NVIDIA or Intel. So that's one. Second is the supply chain issues of AI hardware. If you look at the entire supply chain, initial manufacturing, starting from the initial manufacturing, these are likely to persist in 2024. Now, a lot of you would have heard about TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Limited, which is the sole manufacturer of NVIDIA's H100 and A100. I talked about these processors that they power tools like ChatGPT, and they are also the majority, they are also the backend of majority of the AI data centers today. So now their chairman openly said that they have been facing chip constraints since last almost 1.5 years, and they anticipate this to continue even for 2024. Hence, all of this gives, makes us believe that the supply will still remain crunched, and which will likely to keep the prices of hardware high even in 2024. So to overcome this situation, what we are seeing is there are 2 things happening in 2024. So let's talk about all of those 2 things. Number one is the rise of small language models, and it's quite evident from the graph that you're seeing on your screens, right? That the trend of small language model started in 2023 itself, and what we expect is 2024 will only see an accelerated version of this trend. So model providers, including the likes of Meta with their Llama model, Google with their Gemini Pro, and even nano versions of Gemini, Databricks with their Dolly. And then there are a whole host of small language models which are in open source, which are not even featured here. They are, there are launching of small models which are relatively smaller in size, and if you compare them to the likes of GPT-4. So it is a fact that large language models are resource intensive and require high computational resources, both for training and for inferencing. So this is where we see that smaller LLMs to be more resource effective, and given that they are smaller in size. And there was this interesting research by Anyscale. They launched, they did a small research. It's a famous AI startup. If you have not heard about that, they found that the expense for generating just a small paragraph with Llama 2, which has, it's the 7 billion variation of Llama 2, is approximately 30 times lesser than as we compared to GPT-4. So that's the kind of course, there are other things. It's not commenting on the accuracy, but just from a cost perspective, at least this is kind of what we are identifying. So additionally, a lot of these small language models are also trained for purpose-defined and very targeted domain-specific use cases. And we see that very small models specifically targeting domains are also coming into picture. So example, Bloomberg GPT, MedPalm 2, and Climate Bird from Google. All of these are certain examples of large, small language models which are coming up. So that's trend number one. So we see that this is going to accelerate even in 2024. So that's one. Now, sort of an extension to this trend is we anticipate another thing which is happening is the rise of on-device AI, on-device generative AI, and which is say generative AI technology performing training as well as inferencing of the queries directly on the edge devices. So it is essentially the deployment of these models on edge devices such as smartphones, IoT devices, edge servers. So this is a trend that we are seeing happening, and based on our discussions with experts, what we have found is that implementing these large language models at edge can significantly reduce cost in the way that it doesn't transfer the data from edge location to cloud, which is a costly affair. So, which is longer and as well as costly. So hence it keeps the cost in check. So that's the primary reason that we are seeing that edge specific generative AI applications are coming into forum. Now what we just saw that there is a broader trend of generative AI, making Gen AI more accessible and usable in terms of smaller language models, which are very specific and domain centric. Now many of these models are being developed so that edge compatibility can also be taken care of, and this sort of helps in enabling Gen AI on edge devices as well. So very recently, I think a few days back, there was a recent announcement by Samsung and Google where they entered into a new partnership, in which what they're doing is they're deploying Gemini Pro and another model on Samsung smartphone. So this is just the starting of how we see and anticipate generative AI coming onto the edge devices. So now, also for quite some time, the trend has been to move the computing resources closer to users, right? And closer to users and devices where the devices are located, most importantly to where the data is generated. In similar way, what we see is that this will also extend to generative AI, which will help in making the Gen AI outputs more efficient, faster, and in a way more personalized, as they will rely on real-time data which is generated by users. So while there are many such innovations that are folding into this space, but we see that these two prominent trends will be there from a hardware perspective and keeping the costs for generative AI in check. So that sort of concludes the second theme for us. And I think we have a poll. Yeah. So we would really like to understand, how do you want to overcome the high cost of generative AI in 2024? So what we anticipate is that like many of you might not have figured this ROI equation yet, but we see that using smaller language models seems to be the shorter term and quicker, um, you know, quicker solution to this problem, at least in a shorter term. This is what we anticipate.
And I can add a privacy. I think, see, there is no straight answer or easy answer to the ROI question. It is a pertinent question, absolutely yes. As I said, with AI, because there are so many unknowns and intangibles, the answer is not easy. Especially, because the second theme was all around, hey, look, the costs are gonna remain high, right? And that is why we're gonna see, innovative constructs like small language models or processing or compute happening on edge devices. Some of that needs to be baked into, whether it's a long-term strategy, short-term strategy, which use cases, which areas, and what is the context. So that needs to be kept in mind. But in general, the ROI conversations are going to become more and more pertinent as enterprises get exposed to the costs involved with the Gen AI implementation.
Yeah.
So with that, let's move to our next theme. And in the interest of time, we're gonna move a little fast because we have 3 more themes to cover, and the next one is probably one of those themes where you can have an independent webinar altogether, which is how Gen AI is gonna impact the talent, right? And my strong conviction, the way I put it is, see, Gen AI, unlike most other technological disruptions, will have a more intimate relationship with talent. Now, what that means is, yes, because Gen AI is such a disruptive tech, it's a new tech, there will be a lot of demand for skills related to generative AI, which is what you are seeing on this slide. There was a massive jump in Gen AI related talent demand in 2023. And some of that, and you can broadly look at that talent in 3 categories. One is core tech talent, which is, the ML engineers, ML ops engineers, data scientists, and even, folks who will enable AI, right? So data engineers and others. So there's a core tech demand. Then there are tool specific, skills that were being sought, be it tool or language specific, be it for Python, be it for specific Gen AI platforms or tools. And third is, the kind of skills or talent who sit at the cross section of domain, business, as well as technology, who can help orchestrate and deploy Gen AI. So there's going to be a huge demand, and that demand will continue. There was a lot of demand in 2023. We saw a lot of players from the supply side ecosystem, big techs launching large scale learning initiatives, certifications, and even the system integrator service providers upskilling, training, retraining a lot of their employees to be AI, Gen AI ready, numbering into thousands and tens of thousands, right? So this thing will remain. The demand for Gen AI talent will remain. But more importantly, and the reason why I said that, look, Gen AI will have a more intimate relationship with talent is because it will also impact the non-tech talent. And at the heart of this entire conversation is that, look, Gen AI fundamentally solves for a business problem, right? A lot of people would think that it's a technological innovation, it's a new tech, so it's a tech play. But I want to, kind of clear the air here, and I'll draw parallels with cloud. In a lot of ways, if you look at, the two big disruptions, in the last 10, 20 years, cloud is fundamentally solving for a tech problem, right? The inefficiencies in the tech stack, bringing in more scalability, bringing in more agility of how, the tech teams work or how the tech works within an organization. Gen AI, on the other hand, if you really think about it, it's solving for a business problem. It is being enabled by a new age transformational tech, yes, but at the end of the day, it is solving for a business problem. That's what happened with ChatGPT. When the technology was rolled out, it was solving for a business problem, which was creating new content, right? So Gen AI is going to solve for business problems, which means the technology will have impact on how the regular workforce, the non-tech people work with the technology. And that is where we believe there are 3 or 4 implications of how Gen AI will impact talent. Number one, there will be the rise of AI augmented workers. Normal business users will see implications of how they have to improve their productivity, the quality of their work, by augmenting what they are doing with AI, supporting in certain areas where AI can support them. We are fundamentally entering the era of AI-led automation. 10 years back, automation is something which is not new, right? 10, 15 years back, the whole conversation started with robotic process automation. But that conversation was still, limited to rule-based automation. With Gen AI, I can clearly say we have clearly entered the era of AI-led automation, which means not only just the transactional areas, transactional skills, but we might even see impact in the higher order skills, because Gen AI can do more creative work, right, rather than just menial tasks. And what that also means, third, is there's going to be a widening AI talent scarcity, because there will be a lot of demand for AI related skills. you will see organizations looking at innovative ways of hiring or getting that talent, which also means engaging a lot with the gig workers or the gig economy. Some of the logos that we're showing on the right hand side are some of the companies who have already started doing some stuff around the themes that we're talking about. And then finally, we are saying there will also be implication on the talent team rebalancing, which means there may be whole new set of talent job roles that might open up because of Gen AI, something like AI legal experts or AI audit experts as the technology permeates within an organization. So net to say recap, from a talent standpoint, yes, there will be, I think naturally, and it's a no-brainer that there will be huge demand for AI-related talent. But at the same time, the big picture, theme is Gen AI will also have a huge impact on how business people, normal workers work in an organization, because it is going to impact most type of job roles in the industry today.
Yeah, and Vishal, I know that we are running short of time, but there is a very interesting question around, around job losses due to generative AI. So there is a lot of rhetoric around job losses due to generative AI automating a lot of tasks. So do you think that is this hype, or do you see that happening? And there is also a follow-up question on how can organization determine any impact and implement a transition strategy for this?
Yeah, so that's why I said, we can have a separate webinar just on this theme, because this is a question that has come up a lot. And I think this is also doing, the rounds of media, every other article creating hue and cry in the industry, in the broader market, that look, Gen AI will lead to job losses. There are two or three things I want to say. Number one, if you ask me this direct question, I would say yes and no. And I will explain why I said that. Second, see, I think there is a lot of window dressing going on. Companies firing, laying off people by hiding it under saying, look, it is because of AI. But that has always been the case. Every year, many companies, large organizations, they fire few percentage of their workforce who are non-performing people, who are the low performers, or who would eventually, or were on the verge of kind of leaving the organization. So there's a window dressing happening. The real reason for some of those layoffs is not Gen AI, but it's because of the performance and some of the other issues. And third thing, and this is where I'm coming back to my conversation on whether this will lead to job losses. Yes and no. And I would want to put things in perspective. Say 10 years back, when the RPA industry started, robotic process automation, there was a similar conversation that, look, will automation lead to job losses? And what we saw was that, look, the overall result was it actually didn't. It actually led to whole new creation of an industry, which actually led to greater positive growth or positive momentum to the industry as a whole. And the reason is, say, look, because of any new tech, especially RPA automation or Gen AI, see, there will be few roles that will be killed. Yes, that is true. That is the yes part of my answer. Some of the transactional, low-skilled job, that's what the automation killed. With Gen AI, the argument is that, look, low-skilled job are anyways gonna kill, but even the higher-skilled creative roles, that's where Gen AI can play a role. So some of those roles will get killed. Yes, for sure. But more importantly, see, there are two things happening. One, any new technology will lead to the creation of new set of jobs, which we just talked about in the previous slide. And I talked about how AI will lead to the creation of new set of jobs. But more importantly, see, as some of the jobs get automated, or some of the areas get automated, the fundamental human nature will evolve to the next set of problems that they can solve. So what I'm trying to say is, if we can take this conversation to any level of abstraction, if we are saying the bottom part of the pyramid will get automated, what I'm saying is the pyramid itself will expand, because people will look for newer ways, more ways of adding more productivity, more value to what they are doing, which will be a collective upward movement for the organization as a whole. Which means it's a philosophical conversation, which means the net effect of Gen AI on talent will be net positive, right? And if I take it to one more level of granularity, people ask me, hey, which jobs will see getting kind of eradicated because of Gen AI? I'm saying it's the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, which skills are more important? And really, if I take the example, let's say a customer executive, customer sales or service executive, See, if I take that example and I can break down, and that executive, it's one job role, but there are multiple skills needed for that person to do his or her job. And you can break down those skills into four categories. One, where AI will take over, right? Those skills will not be needed. Second, skills where AI or any tech cannot do anything. You still need pure human intervention. Third are the areas, and this is going to become a big bucket, where AI will be an augmentation to the human job, which means AI and machine humans will come together, and we see this happening in a lot of jobs. And fourth, new skills that will be needed because AI is going, or Gen AI is going to permeate how talent works. So if you look at these four buckets and the individual skills needed for all job roles, I think that will help you put things in perspective to look at where Gen AI will kill the jobs or will create new jobs. But the bottom line, or the parting comment on this thing, I don't want to spend any more time on this, is the way I would put it is Gen AI isn't going to replace people, but people who use Gen AI are definitely going to replace the people who will not. So that's where I'm going to leave it. Let's move on to our next theme in the interest of time. Over to you, Priya.
Yeah, and I think we have a poll. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so the next theme that we are going to talk about is how the startup community boomed in Gen AI space in 2024. And we see clear signs of market consolidating as we move along in 2024. What we are seeing as a result is that, and we anticipate that this will make Gen AI more practical for enterprise users, be it in terms of existing systems being augmented with generative AI capabilities, or say availability of end-to-end Gen AI systems instead of currently fragmented tools that are out there in the Gen AI ecosystem. So what we saw in 2023 was there are more than 200 plus generative AI startups that were launched, and these are just the new launches. Remind you, there are more than 900 plus generative AI providers or technology providers in this space based on our initial analysis, and or players which have some certain Gen AI capabilities, which received funding in 2023. And across all these players, what we saw was that more than $30 billion money was raised just in the last year. If you look at the distribution, we found that most of the new players were launched in the application and application platforms and foundational model layer space, followed by some in services and infrastructure. But so someone like including the likes of Mistral AI, which was launched very late last year. I think very late last year, and it has already received $650+ million funding till date. The company, what it does is it provides an open source platform which helps companies to develop AI models. The company also operates in the model provider layer, so that's why you see its name both, and it has a Mistral 7 billion model as well. So in the app, that's in the platform and model layer. In application, we have likes of Pika, which is a startup which is developing AI platform for editing and generating films. It received, I think, close to $55 million funding till date. So also, while there were only limited number of new startups that we saw in 2023 in hardware and services space, we did see a lot of innovation coming from existing technology startups. For example, I think I spoke about Sambonova system some time back when I was talking about hardware, but it launched a new AI chip which is capable of running models up to 5 trillion parameter. I think it was again late last year. So in a nutshell, 2023 was momentous for Gen AI startups. We see a lot of these players achieving great benchmarks. We saw OpenAI breaching the 1 billion revenue benchmark, and then Anthropic, which is a biggie in this space, which got $4 billion funding from AWS. So the market was extremely active. We also saw some players getting into more mature space, getting more enterprise clients. Now, what do we see in 2024? And what we anticipate is that M&A deals in Gen AI space will pick up in 2024. And we have already started seeing some initial signs of this happening, where we saw close to I think 15 to 18 acquisitions taking place in Gen AI space even in 2023. Now, similar to other markets, we saw some common themes and common reasons for these deals to take place. One is um, technology players which do not have AI capabilities, they wanted to add Gen AI to improve their technical capabilities. So we saw that Databricks acquired Mosaic ML. The company had few MLOps capabilities already, but with Mosaic's acquisition, now it provides a full AI stack. So that's one. Second is sort of forward and backward integration, where we are seeing companies adding and moving Gen AI as a next step in the value chain. So, for example, someone which is playing in the platform layer or the model category, they are requiring application layer just from a completion perspective, so that they are playing into end-to-end Gen AI stack. And the third, given that there is limited Gen AI talent available, so acqui-hire deals are also becoming prominent, which is more to acquire talent capabilities. Now, these are some general themes which we witnessed. However, I would also, like to talk about an initial hypothesis that we have, and we are sort of testing this out, and it's still early, but Gen AI is an expensive technology. There is no doubt about that. A lot of these, and what we know is that a lot of these smaller startups are not able to figure out the right monetization options for them. And that is why what we anticipate is that there will be a greater consolidation happening, especially in the model provider and application layer. So that's an early hypothesis that we are testing out. But yeah, so that's theme number 4. So we see that a lot of consolidations, M&A activity will happen in 2024 as we move along. Yeah. Also, quickly, I would like to take a minute to introduce, to share the complimentary access to our recently launched AI Top 50 technology provider list as part of, for you to attend this webinar. So out of more than 5,000 plus technology providers in the entire AI space, we've identified top 50 of them, which are making most impact in the market. And one may expect that there are quite a few Gen AI providers, that have made it to the list this year. So please, I think, use the link which is already shared in your chat to access the report, and let us know if you have any questions or want to discuss this further.
And Priya, quick time check. We have 6 minutes, so if you can quickly go through the last theme. Yeah.
So I think this is the last theme for today's webinar, and an important theme from a regulation perspective. I will not spend too much time on this, but if you look back in 2023, there were a large number of lawsuits that got piled up against these large tech and model providers. So latest one being New York Times suing OpenAI and Microsoft. Amidst all of these, statements, amidst all of this situation, there is also a written statement by OpenAI, which is openly circulating, which states that it is impossible to train today's model without using copyrighted materials. So that's again sort of a thing that we found. But if you look at the regulations, which are highlighted in yellow, they largely failed to keep pace with the technology last year. We saw some initial regulations coming up, and we see that especially the European Union AI Act that got launched. I think there was a question sometime back on this act. I will not drain the slide, but some of laws are doing is that it also states that the companies who do not comply with the rules can be fined up to 7% of their global revenue. So in a nutshell, we believe that 2024 will have more stricter regulations for companies operating in Gen AI space, and we'll see some of the actions being taken on this front. And that brings me to the last slide that we have. What will it do? It will likely force generative AI providers to make it more safer for the enterprise users. This will also have several implications, and let me talk about some of those, right? So as we see regulations progressing, we anticipate legal experts to become an important component of AI teams. So I have myself seen, openings such as AI General Counsel, being launched by Accenture, Nvidia, all of these biggies in the space, and they are being opened by some large technology companies. So legal expertise as a skill will be a new addition in AI. So that's number one. Second is AI auditing. So we anticipate that AI audit will be threshed out as a new niche service area where from for both model providers and for the models. They will be audited for compliance on a regular interval. And I think there was a very interesting startup, Fortify AI. It's a tech company, but they've announced an auditing services for these model providers in this space. So it's if you want to check that out, so that's something very interesting which I came across. And lastly, what we anticipate is that 2024 will also witness and benefit from large consortiums, especially in the responsible AI space. So these are some initial steps or implications that we are seeing as part of the AI regulations, of the Gen AI regulations that are coming up in the space. So this brings us, to the end of the themes that we had to present. Generative AI has in 2023 kept us on our toes, and I see 2024 to be no different, but we'll see newer set of conversations emerging in this space as we go along. So I know we
Well,
just
thank you,
have...
Priya. Yeah, no, thank you, Priya. And I think we're gonna skip the poll because we don't have much time. And there are a lot of questions live in the window right now, but we also received over 100 questions prior to the start of this webinar. So I think given that we only have 2 minutes, unfortunately we won't be able to take those questions right now. But I do want to kind of work with our stakeholders and audience. So here's what I suggest: two things. One, a lot of the questions were pertaining to specific industries, how Gen AI will impact insurance, or life sciences, or healthcare, or even business functions like procurement or finance and accounts, right? We have done, we have published a lot of stuff around, some of those business verticals and functions. So I'll encourage everyone to go through our website. There are a lot of blogs and reports around it, so you can access some of that material. Second, if you do feel there are specific Gen AI imperatives and priorities for you in the immediate term, please do feel free to reach out to us, Priya, or Everest Group, handle email IT, and we will surely be coming back to you, and we can have further conversation on how we can help you. So I'll encourage that. The last thing, we've already shared the link for the complimentary copy of our AI Top 50. So please do utilize that, and we'll be happy to have more conversations wherever needed. So thank you everyone for the great webinar.